Friday, everybody. My name's Indy, and that gentleman next to me is Jay Powell from Powell Group Consulting, and welcome to an exciting episode of Indie Game Business, sponsored by the Powell Group. Today, we've got Jenny Jarzabski. She is the senior developer at, how do you pronounce that, Paizo?
At Paizo, that's correct.
Paizo,
Hi.
at Paizo. And the title is unionization in the video game industry, but there's going to be so much more than that. We're going to talk about Pathfinders and some amazing things. So take it away.
Jenny, thanks so much. You came highly recommended from our buddy John over at Paizo. And so we're very excited to talk about this, especially given the fact that unionization is once again a gigantic hot, topic in the industry, given the fact that I think we are now, last I saw, approaching 20,000 layoffs since 2023. That's like entire industries that we've had issues with. But first, tell us how you originally got into games and walk us through your career up to this point.
Yeah. So I got into games. I guess I've been playing all kinds of games, like video games, games of pretend, things like that for many years. I didn't really start playing tabletop games like what I work on with Pathfinder and Starfinder at Paizo until sometime. It was right after college. I had some friends who invited me to a Pathfinder game, actually, and I started playing. I loved it so much that I started going to conventions and local events. I started GMing more. I was at first just playing, but I got really into it. I started GMing. I started volunteering and going to conventions that I would actually fly across the country just to go and run games or work like headquarters, for a company as a volunteer. I did that for many years. I found out that writing for games was actually a career that I could have through some meetings. I met some folks, Owen Casey Stevens, who is a legend in the tabletop industry. I thought he was just some guy who sat down next to me at a con and was really nice and told me that since I was a writer that I could actually write for games. And so I tried, and sure enough, I started to get freelance contracts working for Paizo and other companies publishing tabletop games. And now I'm here. I've been at Paizo for almost 4 years now as a full-time staffer. I'm a senior developer. I have worked on Pathfinder. I worked on the remaster. I've done a lot of freelance for Pathfinder 1 and 2, but my big thing right now is working on Starfinder. And I am part of the team launching the Starfinder 2nd edition playtest, which is super exciting. We're going to launch that playtest at Gen Con in August this year, actually. So if you're interested in that, please check us out at Gen Con. If you're not there, we're going to have video talking about our big announcements. And you can go to starfinderplaytest.com to see some little free PDFs of things our team has been working on. So that's kind of where I'm at in terms of my job as a game dev.
Gen Con is one of those shows that I've always wanted to go to, but I don't want to go work. I want to go and just have fun. But at some point I'm going to make it. And maybe now that I've got, a kid who's all into tabletop now, at least for the past week or so, that'll work out as long as his dad doesn't DM him out of doing it. This is very interesting. When you are writing for a tabletop company like Paizo, what are you actually writing?
So what you're writing, so it depends. We have rules books. So our rule books have a list of things like what your character needs to play the game. So your class, your ancestry, which is your species or your race. So are you an orc or are you a human? Are you an elf? Your class obviously is are you a barbarian or a wizard? And it gives you abilities based on that. So the core rule book kind of sets up how you as a player can build a character. Or if you're the game master or DM, GM, you'll be the person running those rules. So we have our core rule books. We also have adventures. So we have pre-made adventures that have everything you need with encounters, backstory, maps, NPCs, and things to take you through an adventure so that you can run that adventure for your friends, your kids, your coworkers, whoever. So that's what you're actually writing. If you work on the core rule book, you are writing player-facing rules or GM-facing rules. So you're developing abilities, to use as a part of a class or an ancestry. If you're working on adventures, you're probably writing encounters and scenarios of whether it's a fight with a bunch of monsters in a forest or a busy tavern where you might talk to the innkeeper or overhear some secrets about town politics and get into some kind of like a fight or an argument or try to convince someone. That's all the things that you're writing, is presenting that so that players and GMs can interact with it. Because with tabletop games, with a video game, you have all of these things, but it's all in the background and the computer is doing it all for you. But in a tabletop game, at least if you're playing in person and you're not using a virtual tabletop tool, you kind of have to run all of those rules yourself, which can be really fun and rewarding. And it can allow you to really customize the experience, but that is what you're writing.
So it's interesting that you actually handle both of them. So you're doing the official, I don't want to call it technical. It's not exactly technical writing, but it's sort of technical writing. And then you're doing the all the modules and all of that sort of stuff as well. Paizo had an interesting year last year. So
sure did.
Thanks to our friends at Watson. So, and for those of you who aren't familiar and don't necessarily know, last year, Hasbro corporate, somebody had the bright idea to completely restructure their licensing agreement and take everything that they had previously done, which was, okay, if you made something for D&D, a module or whatever, you were free to use it and you could sell it, and Hasbro lets you do it your own thing. And then they changed the rules and said, well, we're going to charge you a bunch of money. And that caused a bit of a kerfluffle. What
to say the least, yes.
So when that announcement came out, what was the immediate reaction in the Paizo office? And give us, without going into any obviously confidential details here, give us a little rundown on how the next 6 months went at Paizo.
So yeah, we had a little bit of an oh shit moment. I mean, we were also still no, I'm now I'm trying to think. Yeah, we were still in the midst of bargaining our contract. So we'll talk about that later because we'll talk about unionization. So we already had a lot going on at Paizo. And then of course, we heard this, we found this out. And what it meant for us was that we just, WotC did go, they did walk back some of the worst decisions that they seemed poised to make. But at that point, we realized that we really had to protect ourselves, our staff, our contributors, also all the third-party publishers who publish in the Paizo sphere. We wanted to make sure that we were protected legally, and also just wow, that happened. So we accelerated our timeline on some projects that we had. One of those projects was the remaster project. So most of the new Pathfinder 2 books that you'll find in game stores now actually have some adjustments to them. A lot of it are things that we did to just kind of further make sure that our intellectual property is very much distinct for a lot of reasons, but legal reasons being one of them, of course. So we went through this process of it just gave us fuel to go through with the remaster and just make some updates and shifts in our game. A lot of things that we've wanted to do anyway, and we've been talking about. It also gave us the push to say, you know what? It's time. We've been working on Starfinder 2nd edition. We've been talking about it, but it's time to happen because Starfinder and Pathfinder are fully compatible. Both of them use our new license. So we now have, in the spirit of the OGL, we created our own kind of version of that, which is called the Orc license. Yes. And so that was kind of our thing was we're going to launch our remaster, and Starfinder 2nd edition will both use the Orc license. And we are providing that as well for other creators and community members to use for their projects that they want to publish and monetize. So that was our response, was we really love the OGL. We don't want to see it go anywhere. So we'll create our own, and it will be held by a legal company, so that our company, Paizo, no matter what happens at Paizo, we can't decide to change or revoke it, that it will be there in perpetuity to be used the way that we intended it to be used when we created it.
And if I remember correctly, there was an entire warehouse of stuff that got sold in weeks because so many people just said, "Okay, we're switching my campaign from D&D over to Starfinder or Pathfinder." Um, that was it was one of those things that I've been doing this a long time, and I've seen a lot of companies screw up in a lot of ways. But when that news came out, it was just one of those days that I was like, "Holy shit! What in what were they thinking?" And you have to assume that a lot of people are like get all uppity and they're like, "Oh, we're leaving," and then they never actually do because they're too lazy or they don't really care or whatever. But we actually did see a sizable chunk of people move over. Even in this household, you know, years and years ago, I played D&D, and then when my son and his friends came to me, they were like, "We don't play D&D." I'm like, "Nah."
Yeah,
we're gonna play Pathfinder.
People really did switch, and at the last year, being at different conventions like Gen Con, PAX, Plugged, even GDC, I've had people come up to me and tell me that they just tried out Pathfinder or Starfinder, whether they switched fully and said, "You know what, I'm buying all the books, I'm converting, I'm done," or if they just wanted to check it out. I've had a lot of people tell me they've been trying Pathfinder, Starfinder, and other games, other tabletop games from, indie publishers and just other smaller publishers, which I think is really great because, I know people that work at Wizards and they're great people. It's a great game. It really is sad to see when executives make these sorts of decisions, but it is really interesting, like you said, because it seems like consumers really did, they voted with their wallets, and there really were changes to gaming as a result of this. So it's something that anyone here who is a company owner or has power in a company, think about it, because it really does matter. Like they used to say there's no such thing as bad publicity, but I'm not really sure. I'm not sure if that's the case anymore.
They're very much. Ask Sony, from 3 weeks ago. And it's like, I don't know if these things are just getting more press because of how tuned in we are to the rest of the world now. And we sit around, we doom scroll all day long, but we just saw, 3 weeks ago, Sony was like, "Hey, if you bought Helldivers on PC, now you have to sign up for a Sony account," and literally killed accounts in like 167 countries.
Yeah. And then the company was like, "Sorry, we see that you didn't like that. We won't do that again." It's like success.
I mean, the developers, my heart goes out to Arrowhead because it's not their fault. They didn't. No. They're the ones that caught a lot of grief for it, but it's Sony. And I was actually pleasantly surprised that Sony backed out on that, because I honestly did not expect them to do it, because that's just typically the way Sony is. It's like this way or the highway. So speaking of unionization, how did the whole process start at Paizo? What led up to it? How did that ball get rolling? Why did you decide to do it? And let's just start there.
So a few years back, we had kind of a series of events at Paizo. This was obviously way back before, OGL times and everything else that's been happening recently. But there were some things that happened in the company that weren't popular with all of the staff. And just overall, we had all kind of started talking with one another and thought like, "Hey, I wish we got paid more." And like, we have some people on staff who really aren't making, they're really low wages for the Seattle area where we all were living and working. And there were just things that we wish we could change. So we had several different unionization efforts kind of going on independently. And we finally got to a point where some employees kind of came together, and talked together and realized, oh, hey, we can like share notes, we can share work on this. So we just came together to see if we could make a difference at our company, basically. And then we kind of had all this, we had been planning in secret and like having all these secret like Discord conversations, outside of work, and trying to organize all this because we had no idea how the company was actually going to take it when we announced that we want to have a union. So we were planning all this. We went with CWA, that's Communication Workers of America, because every union kind of has to have a bigger union sponsor. Every union is different, and it is going to be determined by the democratic vote of the people in the union, but we have to have that legal and financial sponsorship. So we went through CWA, and when we finally were ready, we announced that we were going to have a union. And at this point, our administrators, our executives had already been hearing that there was some disgruntlement, I think, on staff as well as in the community, that there were some things coming out. Nothing groundbreaking, but there were things going on that people didn't like. And so when they heard that we wanted to unionize, they didn't fight us. Within a year or within a week, they voluntarily recognized our union, which means the company has decided they're not going to try to union bust or try to convince us, talk us out of it. They just said, all right, you want a union? Cool. You can have a union and we will negotiate with you. And so at that point we announced, and we were ready for anything. And then there was like no resistance. And then we just went into our negotiation. But yeah, the big issues there were just things like, decisions that we felt were arbitrary, like not having things codified, like disciplinary procedures, not layoff, but like, how to handle, like letting go of employees, things like that. These were all things that didn't have, we felt, strict codified policies. We also felt like we should be paid more, and we wanted to know more about the financials. And those are all things that we were able to get into once we started negotiating with our executives. And like I said, it wasn't like always sunshine, lollipops, and rainbows, but it was honestly, it was not a bad experience. It was really interesting. And yeah, we just kind of jumped in because we thought things could be better. And it turns out we were right. Like things could be better, actually.
It is good when companies decide that they aren't going to fight it and they're going to recognize it immediately, because obviously that doesn't happen everywhere. No. And it's weird to say they're not going to try to union bust, which is illegal here in the US, but it doesn't stop big companies from trying to do it. They just do it through ulterior means.
Exactly.
So when you went about finding, so you have to have this bigger union. Mm-hmm. How did you find the CWA, and how do you pick which bigger union to go to?
So I'm not the one who originally got in touch with him, but so every union has organizers who are representatives who have been working with the union, who have been in the union, and they will talk to you and kind of help you through the process or just give you information. So we talked to a few folks like that. The person we talked to is Ted Hooker from CWA. He's the nationwide organizer. He's really great. So we just kind of talked to him, and he gave us some resources and walked us through the process. He was honestly, we just felt like CWA was a good fit for us. It covers everything from telephone installation to customer service workers at those companies, to people that are doing the installation, to newscaster people. Another one we considered was IATSE. So there's some other really good unions that I think would have been a good fit for us. But the big thing is just figuring out, with your company, with what you do for a living, which big union, like which CWA, IATSE, whatever, has other jobs like yours that it already covers, because they're going to have more information about your unique problems, struggles, concerns, versus, we're obviously not going to go with United Auto Workers of America, because that has nothing to do with
I hear they get
books.
Pretty good deals, Jenny.
I do too, right? It's like, hey, I'd love to get in with the Teamsters, but like that would just be for our warehouse. And so at Paizo, so we're unique in that Paizo is a fairly small company, but everyone at Paizo is under the CWA umbrella as United Paizo Workers. So everyone from some of our creative directors that aren't managers, to our warehouse workers, our customer service reps, all of those folks are under CWA. And we just felt like CWA would best cover all of our positions that we have at Paizo, which is why we picked them.
So it's not necessarily that everybody at the company has to be doing something with communications.
Right.
It's a matter of, okay, this group is going to understand the position that we're in better than, like the UAW or something.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
And then I just lost my next. Oh, all right. So
it's okay.
my brain, and it's Friday.
It's early. It's pre-noon.
Is there not a bigger union that covers more like game industry companies?
So far, no. Paizo is actually one of the first American game companies to unionize. So even though we're an analog game, we actually, we have had our stewards and union members have had video game workers come to us and say, actually, we started our union, you inspired us, like you showed us that this could be positive, that this could happen, or we used your contract when we were negotiating, we looked at your contract and we like borrowed language from it because we thought it was good, or we used it as a starting point, which is really cool. So CWA and IATSE are kind of the big ones right now that are, you see presence of both of them. Like when I was at GDC, they both had booths. They both have active campaigns going on right now, which are things I obviously can't talk about. But IATSE is like a very, they mostly do entertainment stuff. So like stagehands, writers, actors are all kind of involved with IATSE. So they make a really natural partnership for game workers. CWA, though, also works with communications as well. And they are also a good option. So I think those are the two big unions. There's not like one that is specifically made for game workers, and maybe there will be in the future. But for right now, I would suggest if you're thinking about starting a campaign at your workplace, or you're just curious about it, I would start with IATSE and CWA for sure.
And so unionization always gets brought up, but it's also very much a U.S. thing, because there's plenty of countries, especially in Europe, that already have unions. They're already protected. Mm-hmm. So when this organization starts happening, is everyone at Paizo in the U.S., or do y'all have folks overseas as well? And are the overseas folks included in it, or is it a different whole thing?
So there's always, so there's so many fun legal things with unions. Unions typically, it gets weird when you have international employees, for sure. A lot of times, I know CWA covers some unions that have American and Canadian employees in them. Paizo is mostly American workers. We do have a couple folks from Canada who work for us. They are contractors. So they're like long-term contractors. So one of them is a manager. So that person wouldn't qualify to be in the union anyway. You can't be a manager with direct reports and be in the union. You can still benefit from a union in your workplace, because typically the protections kind of trickle out to everyone. Like when you get better pay and better benefits, everybody is going to benefit from it, even the managers too. But as for our contractors can't be in the union. But again, we have some protections that can apply to them just because they work at Paizo. And we also have like everything now, our contract codifies all that. So it codifies the difference between, full-time and contract employees versus our short-term contractors, like our freelance contributors who do some writing and art for us, but are not on staff, that don't receive like a regular pay from Paizo. So we do have a few Canadians. They are not in our union, but again, it's because they are contractors. If they weren't contractors, then they probably could be in our union. But again, there's just legal stuff. And this was the situation that we entered into. Who knows? It could change in the future, but that's how it is for now.
Because that's always one of the things that I wonder when a lot of the American companies start unionizing. It's like, okay, but games, and especially, since 2020, are very much remote. I mean, even my team at the Powell Group, we've got folks in the US, we've got folks in Chile, we've got folks in South Africa, and that's probably going to expand even more. That's like the beauty of being in the industry right now, is that you can pull talent from all over the world. You're not confined to like your local area anymore.
Yeah.
Unless you're one of those managers that's like everybody has to be in an office, which is absolutely ridiculous in my opinion. But
yeah, well, luckily we're not like that. We are now mostly remote. We do have our warehouse team is on site, because unfortunately
they kind of need to be there.
Yeah, unfortunately we haven't found out a way for them to like, load boxes and like organize our warehouse and do their other tasks like remotely, but
drones. That's where the robots
have them all like
in.
Remote controlling a drone. I would be fine with that. I don't want to replace them with robots. Like give them a robot to control. That would be awesome.
So when you're expanding and when you've got worldwide people, what's to prevent like the parent company from going, okay, look, we can hire somebody in the US, but they're going to be bound to this union, or we can get somebody from overseas and they're going to be a lot cheaper and we don't have to worry about,
Yeah.
I mean, where does that line fit?
I think it depends on the company. I know there's definitely companies that would do something like that. That already tends to happen even when you don't have unions. Like, in fact, that is a big unionizing issue for a lot of people, is feeling like outsourcing is either taking away the availability of jobs, or it's driving down like the pay and benefits, because the company could be unethical and go find people in another country where, you don't have to pay them as much. And instead of paying them to more of a US standard and doing them a solid, you just get them cheap, you get that cheap labor, and then it affects everyone. So I don't know that unionizing exacerbates that. I think that's already present. Luckily, Paizo is not the type of company that is doing things like that. But it is certainly a concern. I do think, though, if you have a union, again, you have some power to, negotiate for a contract that has strong language that talks about how contractors and when contractors are hired, and, making sure that they have some protections as well. Even though they're not union employees, there's nothing stopping you, except for whatever your employer will agree to, from putting language in that contract that says, we're going to actually treat contractors like they're going to make the same wages as a union employee. They just maybe don't have a guaranteed job. They're just working for like this window, or they're working on this project. So there's ways to protect yourself and to even protect those contractors as well if you unionize.
Given the last couple of years in the industry, I don't think anyone is guaranteed a job anymore.
I don't either. Yeah, I know.
Take what you can get. It really is. I mean, we've seen it everywhere. So what has changed? I mean, with as much, if there's confidential stuff, obviously we're not going there, but what has changed since you've unionized for the better? And are there things that have changed for the worse?
So first of all, what's changed since we unionized is that everybody got a raise. All bargaining unit employees got at least some of a raise. We, as a group, democratically decided that we would put most of that effort toward our absolute lowest paid staff, because we did have some people who truly, hadn't, their salaries just hadn't been updated in a long time, I guess. And we got them to where they're making a living wage, but everyone else also took an increase. So everybody got a raise. And it was a guaranteed raise that exactly what you got. And we've been a lot more transparent. Our executives have started having quarterly financial meetings with us where they share financial information. They talk with us about like strategies that they want to develop or that they have coming up. We go over new products and initiatives that are coming out of different departments. So I feel like there's more transparency and more communication since we started the union. And I know there is. We also now have a thing I really like, which is our union stewards and other representatives as needed meet quarterly with our leadership, our executives, and we talk about various issues and concerns on both sides of the workforce. So the executives can bring up concerns like things that they are worried about or things that they might want to go into like effects bargaining over, which just means we're not redoing the contract, but we want to figure out this one issue. Like we didn't think of this and we need to figure it out together. So we're going to have some follow-up meetings where we hash this out and negotiate over it. And we get to bring up concerns. And it's been a really good way to just keep communication open, keep rumors from getting out of control, and like have answers for rumors or things like that. And just to know what's going on. And I do feel like, I had to do a little more work because I was part of the bargaining team, and I'm also a steward. So I've lost a little bit of my free time. So that's not the best, but I feel like overall it's positive, because even though, negotiation is by necessity and it feels like an adversarial situation because you're talking with your employers who have the power over your hiring, firing, your pay, everything. But I really think that it has improved things because we all, we're all making more money. We all have more investment in our jobs because we know things that are going on behind the scenes, and we can kind of feel more of an ownership and understanding of all that. And we also feel like, I feel like anyway, that the executives don't have to listen to us, but I feel like they are hearing us. Like, they're hearing our concerns, and they're at least considering them, and there would never be a way that they could claim that they didn't know if there was a problem. And same for us. Like, they could tell us things, and it's like, well, that we can't claim that the workforce didn't know this because we talked about it in this meeting together. So I honestly don't think anything negative has come out of it, because it's really been a positive for all the employees, for sure. And even some of our executives, I've heard them say that it wasn't as stressful of a process as they thought it was going to be. They feel like they know us better. They know what we want. They don't have to worry about us being like secretly disgruntled and then just like quitting one day. So,
but and that's a lot of it too. And that's where I mean, obviously, I'm a CEO, and I have a workforce, and I always try to be as transparent as possible. But partly is that's because I don't want them worried about everything as well. Or if there are things to be worried about, let them know that, okay, this is going on to address it, or we're doing this, or we're trying this, or, what have you. I mean, it is one of those things. I mean, as an owner, it actually transparency takes the stress off of me a little bit, because I can share my stress. It's
like, now too.
Now So how many people do you actually need? I mean, obviously indie teams come from, everything from 1, 2, 3 people all the way up to 30, 40, 50. If you're thinking about doing this, how many people collectively do you need to go out and get a union?
So it depends on, I feel like I keep saying it depends.
That is the motto of this show, Jenny. Don't worry.
Depends.
I mean, luckily we don't have a drinking game that goes along with this.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
We would all be hammered, especially at the end of a conference. But yes, go ahead. It depends.
So basically you need a majority. So if you want your union to be recognized, or worse, if your union isn't voluntarily recognized, but you want to take that vote anyway, you basically need at least 30% of workers, I believe, according to the NLRB, is if you have at least 30% of your workforce who qualifies. Managers with direct reports typically don't qualify, so the CEO can't be in the union. But like, if you have 30%, whether it's 10 workers or like 300 or 2,000 or more workers, if you have 30% of those people who will sign a union card, the National Labor Board will take a vote. And then you'll need a majority. So you just need it's like a majority plus one. So like 50% plus one person to actually ratify the union to say this is official. But all you really need is just a few other people, or yourself. If you're in a company and you want to unionize, chances are there's already a unionization effort that's going on. It can be really hard and scary to go up to people, like coworkers, and be like, hey, are you trying to start a union? Because it feels weird. And if you don't know them, you don't know what their beliefs about unions are, and you don't want to step in it or anything. So I'm not saying you should always have to do that, but try to get to know your coworkers more, try to talk to them. And as long as you just have a few people, that are willing to reach out to CWA, IATSE, somewhere like that, and follow through with it, that'll get you started.
It's just a matter of making sure that and I can imagine, especially at a bigger company, it's like there is a lot of that. Okay, we have to quietly ask, because then we don't know if someone's going to go narc us out to the bosses, or that's not pleasant. That's not something I want to deal with. You mentioned being a union steward. So what is that, and what do you do?
So a union steward is a person who has taken an oath basically to uphold the union contract. So basically, that makes it sound really fancy and like I'm some kind of secret organization member, but it's not. It's basically I have learned the contract that I helped negotiate for. I have a copy of it. I've read it. I will read it again. the idea is that if there is a problem that arises, an employee can come to me or any other steward and say, hey, I am concerned about this. Like, I have a problem that I think might be a violation of the contract, or just I have a problem, I'm unhappy. So basically, I'm a representative for other employees. The first place I can start is just going directly to, I could tell the employee, like, well, have you talked to your manager? Have you talked to HR? And if they've done that and they're not satisfied with the response, or if there was a concerning response, at that point, you know, I have the ability that I can talk to them as well. And I can kind of, you know, we can go into one of those union company meetings and say, hey, there's a problem in this department. Like, people are complaining about this. Sometimes that can end the issue and solve it right there. But if that doesn't work, if we can't negotiate and talk our way through things, we have another option, which is that we can file a grievance, which is saying that we believe, the union believes that somebody at Paizo or whatever, that they have violated the contract, that there was a policy or an action that was taken against an employee that is against our contract. And at that point, we start, the union and the company do kind of an investigation. It's a lot of boring paperwork and meetings, basically, but basically it just creates a paper trail to kind of go through and investigate the situation and say, is there a problem? Okay, there is a problem. So the company can do something to fix that. And if there's not a problem, well, okay, we can talk to the worker and figure out what is going on. And usually, you know, those can sometimes get resolved very easily. Sometimes those take more time and might require, you know, an investigation, some meetings. But basically, that's what a steward is just a representative for employees. We can also be called in if an employee, there's something called Weingarten rights, which is if you are an employee in the United States and you have a union, you have a right to having a union representative in a disciplinary meeting with you. So say your manager is like, hey, we need to talk about your performance. You can call in a union steward to just kind of be there, take notes, ask questions on your behalf, just kind of be there in your corner. And again, if there's a real problem, if the worker is at fault, it's going to come out in the investigation. And the union stewards aren't here to protect bad behavior or to encourage any kind of, you know, bad behavior, but we are here to just make sure that there is a strong paper trail that protects the union, the workers. But honestly, it also protects the company, because then it's like beyond the shadow of a doubt, this decision that the company made, either we realize this is against our contract and they need to walk that back, or this is fully in tune with the contract, or this person, this employee made a mistake and they do need to have a consequence for it. And either way, we have a paper trail. So that's kind of what you do as a steward, is you're just there to represent. You can be called in to assist with things like that. Obviously, anything, there is kind of an oath and paperwork involved, because it is a position where you might have confidential information about like disciplinary matters. So it's something that you have to kind of apply for. But yeah, that's what stewards do. And before that, I was on the bargaining committee, which meant I was one of the people that sat in the room with our executives and negotiated on behalf of the rest of the staff. So I've been busy.
How was that process? Because it's like you always think of, you know, every movie scenario where you have this going on. I mean, did you have experience like negotiating contracts or HR matters or anything before this, or did you just kind of get dumped into it collectively?
I just kind of found my way into it. I've been in unions before, but I have never negotiated a contract. It wasn't just me. There were other folks. Shout out to all of them. They are super awesome and they all worked really hard. We had our union president, we had someone from CWA who was with us to advise us, to be there in the room, and kind of tell us like when we needed a sidebar, when we needed to know something, and also to talk to CWA lawyers and check on legal things. But honestly, it was a really interesting experience. I learned a lot about labor law. I learned a lot about Paizo. I learned about CWA. I connected. It maybe was a trauma bonding experience because it's people doing extra work on top of their work. But I did bond with other people in my, other workers, but also with our leadership because we were together so much for all these meetings.
It is one of those things that if you've never been involved in it and this is like your first look behind the curtain of how a company's run. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's educating. Sometimes you get that, oh my God, what scenario. It's like this is how you're doing this.
Like, wow.
I get to see that in my job a lot too with other companies. So it's always interesting, but the fact that it wasn't like a traumatizing, because obviously sometimes these things can be extremely contentious mm-hmm. issues. And so the fact that you all were in a position where it wasn't as bad as it could be, is wonderful for you all. It says a lot about Paizo too. So for folks that want to get started down this path, what's the first step? What do they need to do to, start that ball rolling down the hill of getting a union in their company?
So the first thing you can do, go to cwa-union.org. There's a take action button. It'll show you how you can, there's like a lot of places on the website that'll show you how to get started, how you can contact an organizer. If you're not comfortable asking coworkers if they want to join a union, or if they've already started a union, or they're starting a union campaign rather, if there is a union at your workplace, you'll know. Like, I'm sure, like if there's already a union, you probably were told that when you were hired. But and if that's the case, just join it. I mean, it's honestly, you're probably not going to have to do anything unless you step up as a steward. Like, you can just sit back and enjoy the benefits and the protections. You don't have to do anything. But if the campaign hasn't happened yet, or if it's in the works, if you step up, that's great. The more people who step up, the less work everyone individually has to do. But yeah, go to cwa-union.org. Check out IATSE. I think their website it's iatse.net. They both will have places where you can get in touch with an organizer. Organizers can also tell you if there's a campaign. They can say, yeah, actually, we know your company. We're talking to this person. And they can put you in touch with them so you can find out like what work has already been done, what needs to be done next. That's the first place I would start. CWA also has some information for bosses, owners, managers, executives who, especially folks from smaller companies, if you're interested, if you're curious about unions, or if you want to know how you can just be more supportive and better to your employees with or without a union, CWA has some really good resources for like equitable employers. So check that out too. You don't have to be a worker to be excited about what unions can do for your workplace. That's where I'd start.
So what during this entire process, what surprised you? What were you not expecting going into it that has happened, or that, you weren't thinking about this little aspect of it? What have you learned?
I feel like one of the things I've learned is that, revolution and all that, like starting a union is like, you think of it, you see the movies and you see things of like, oh, you hear about union busting and you hear about people going on strike and all these big like demonstrations and stuff. But honestly, we didn't have to do any of that. Luckily, our union campaign was not without its struggles, but it was pretty smooth. And our leadership at Paizo has done their part to make it pretty smooth, which is cool. But I learned that being in a union it's a lot less rabble rousing and a lot more paperwork. Like, it turns out that getting a bunch of people to work together requires some bureaucracy. So be prepared for that, especially if you become a steward or if you're part of the bargaining committee. That I had to read like legal language. I mean, and luckily I'm a tabletop designer and developer, so I know rules language. It's honestly not that different. And so I feel like I and the other bargainers were uniquely prepared for that because we're a bunch of rules lawyers by nature. But just a lot of like dry legal text that we had to like review or write, and just like meetings and paperwork. And if you have a meeting, you need to like have the paperwork and fill that out and send everyone an email. So it's just like, yeah, there's a lot of unglamorous paperwork, but again, that's what protects everything and makes it like authorized, right? Like that's how you have a paper trail and how you can prove that this thing, that this happened or that this was voted for and it was a majority. So it's not always the most exciting. Like if you join a union, you're probably not going to be like walking around on a picket line all the time, like holding a sign and like yelling about workers' rights. It could happen. And honestly, I hope it doesn't happen to you, because if you're there, it probably means that negotiations have broken down for you. So prepare for a lot less of like, out taking it to the streets and demonstrating, and a lot more of I'm working on the computer on a spreadsheet.
But I mean, frankly, learning to create a paper trail and getting in the habit of doing that is one of the things that a lot of developers need to know anyway, because
Absolutely.
when you're dealing with a project that's like 18 months long and you decided to move a milestone or you decided to add a feature and take something else out, 9 times out of 10, everybody doesn't go back into the contract and go, okay, so we're going to restructure the agreement here, do it. It's like on a phone call or whatever. And that's where I see a lot of developers get into trouble with publishers. It's like, well, we agreed to add multiplayer. And I'm like, you fucking what?
Wait, what?
That's not a minor thing you just did. But I mean, it is a good habit to be in the first place. But yes, then again, the fact that, you all are a bunch of, is there a clause in there for rolling difficulty checks on, any specific bar?
Actually do have a clause in there that there's a thing that can be decided by rolling a d20. So we do actually have a couple of like nerd Easter eggs in our contract. And we were all very excited about it. Like the workers, the executives, because they play these games too. And so like we all had a little bit of fun. We had some fun, but like it's mostly legal. And you can find it. I think it's on the CWA website. I feel terrible that I don't know the exact place that it is, but if you do want to look up the United Paizo Workers contract, all contracts are public record, so you can find them online and you can see what that language is. You can actually find like what we have to roll a d20 over. But yeah, it is definitely a good habit.
That is so impressive that y'all put that in there. I was joking, but oh my God, that is so cool.
We really did.
Jenny, you were going to get a raise, but you rolled a 1. And so now.
Yeah, you have to roll off. It is not you roll for raises off a random chart. That would be really messed up, but also funny.
No, we'll put a table in for that. Okay.
You have a table. Yeah. I feel like, we have our pay bands, but I feel like it should just be like the pay table. Like we should just call it that because, roll books.
Jay's driving a Lamborghini. Yeah, he rolled a 20. I mean, it was amazing. That was really good.
Nat 20.
That's right.
Can't argue with that.
Question from YouTube. What's the best place out there to look for unions in my area? Because Google didn't exactly work well for this.
Oh, no. Yeah, like I said, cwa-union.org is the CWA's website. So you could just go straight there and get their information. Same with IATSE, IATSE.net. That is their website. Other than that, if you're ever at a like conventions and like trade shows might have union presence. Like CWA was at GDC this year in San Francisco. I think they've been at some other, IATSE was there too. I think they've been at several other big conventions and like, trade shows and things like that. So keep an eye out for that. But the website is probably going to be your best part to.
All right. So I was going to say, Dan, all right, try one more time, Dan. You cut off the RG that time.
Oh no! Did I cut off?
Trying. Or was that no? That was. But these are U.S. organizations, though, right?
They are, yes.
Okay, all right. So yeah, if you're not in the U.S., then you're probably going to have to go somewhere. There we go. Now we got the right one. You're probably going to have to go somewhere else to find all this sort of stuff. I had another good question, and then like my brain got off on rolling against the table for your raise, and now I don't know where I'm going to go with that. What about that? I mean, I know some of the concerns, and the ones that I see a lot are when, especially the testing groups and the QA, who are the people in the industry who probably need the most help anyway, because that is an absolute brutal slaughterhouse of an area to be in. When I think we saw this with Activision, a group tried to organize, and Activision was just like, okay, well, whatever, you are now laid off, and we're going to take our stuff somewhere else. Is there any way of protecting against that, or is that just like one of those, okay, this is a risk you're going to have to take if you want to make this change?
Yeah, unfortunately, there is always a risk. Laying off an entire team or department due to unionization, it that definitely reads as anti-union, like union busting activity, which is illegal in the US. However, like I think it was before we went live, maybe it was in the beginning, but you did kind of say that, like, just because it's illegal doesn't mean that no one will ever do it. So yes, unfortunately there are horror stories. Like there are, like, I had a very good experience. Paizo's unionizing experience was very smooth and very positive compared to some I've heard of. I've heard of some bad experiences that did end like that. I've heard of some that it didn't end that way, but it was just a fight uphill, like every inch required, a slog. So unfortunately, it is, there is a risk, there is some effort that you have to put into it. But if you can get a group of people with you, like the more people you have supporting you, the less chance you have of that happening. And the sooner you can, if you get in touch with those organizers and those unions, like whether they're national or other international unions, that there are international unions that exist, they can help you. They can give you some resources. They probably can tell you more about what to do in that situation. Fortunately, I didn't have to deal with that myself. And my heart goes out to everyone who is dealing with that or who did deal with it. But I think, though, that you have so much more to lose if you don't try, because, having a union, it doesn't necessarily mean that that the company won't ever do a layoff, or that they won't ever do something that you don't like, or they won't ever, start using international contractors for cheaper or something like that. But you can have protections for everyone, and you can have a contract that says, this is exactly what's going to happen. Like, if there's a layoff, I'm going to get this much severance. I'm going to get this much notice. This is the layoff order. Like, I know, like, where I am based on seniority. If my team takes a hit, it's not great, but it's not a big unknown, right? Like, no. You have something so that there will be some structure in that time. You can get better pay. You can get better working conditions like PTO. You can have these meetings where you make the executives at least listen to you for 30 minutes to an hour. Whether they do anything is up to them, but they listen. So I feel like you have so much more to lose by not trying, that yes, there is a possibility that your company does something scummy and it affects you or your coworkers negatively, but they might just do that anyway. So I would try to just that was our goal, is like, we just want to have some control. Like, we just want to have some say in this and in how things change at our company. And for us, it worked. So,
and I can very much see where having the value is. They can't say they don't know.
Exactly.
And that in and of itself is a huge bonus. I mean, for both sides of the company, because that works for, the executives as well. It's like, okay, we're doing layoffs, because we told you if we didn't get money in for the next 3 months, we were going to. But simply having that transparency and making sure everybody knows what's going on is a big one. The process of getting everybody on the same page. I mean, even at Paizo, we're not talking about hundreds and hundreds of people, but you've got, folks like yourself that are doing a lot of writing, remote, home. You've got folks that are working in the warehouse, packing boxes with the rule books that are not lightweight, I can tell you.
No.
How do you get everybody on the same page? Because one group is going to have a set of needs that the other group's not. So how do you get everybody on the same page? What was that process like?
That was one of the harder parts. It flowed pretty easily, getting a group of people that were in similar teams or who already knew each other, like had worked together. But when it comes to a team or a department that you don't know, you don't have an in, that can be harder because you're basically reaching out to strangers and like, hey, do you want to do some extra work? Or like, do you want to put your job on the line? Not, it's not that bad, but like, that's basically what you're doing is like, hey, come start a problem with me. And we did that. And like, that's just kind of what you do is just, especially once the ball is rolling, like that's what we did. We started with people who we thought we knew, like known quantities. We know this person's going to probably be pro-union, going to want to be involved, and not tell anyone on us what we're doing until it's ready, it's time. And then once you get like those easy, the people that are down, like ride or die for it, you get those people in, then you start recruiting others, because at that point you also have a bigger group, so you're asking less of them. You're just asking them to join a tide rather than be like the first people who kick it all off and like start the problem. And again, I say problem, it's not a problem, but like that's how some people look at it, and that's how it might be.
I mean, it is a problem at some companies.
It is. And it changes. It is a disruption. Like it is a thing that is going to change how your workflow is and how, your experience at work is, hopefully for the better, but it is change. So yeah, that's what we did. We started with the people that we knew, and then we started just taking chances and reaching out. We reached out to people. We used Discord. We tried to keep it out of company spaces as much as possible. So sometimes we'd start the initial, hey, can you talk, would be on Teamwork. But then we would get them to Discord or on the phone or something, so we could have like, let's do this out of company time, like in a private space, and like, let's talk about this. So yeah, but getting people on the same page, the best thing I can say is that when you are ready to start your unionization, you're about to vote on it, you're about to do your contract, you need to have representation from different teams and departments as much as you can, because the issues that affect like the QA people and like the designers is different than like the customer service people or the warehouse people, if you have a warehouse in your business, or the editors. Like there's going to be different issues. So we solicited feedback, and we asked, like we had polls that we sent out to the group and said, hey, like, can you rank these issues in order of importance? And feel free to write in a comment if you have one. And we would ask people like one-on-one as well, like, what's an issue that you're facing right now? Or like, X happened, this new policy, how do you feel about that? Like, how is this affecting your team? So a lot of it is just communication and just talking to people, and just asking them what their problem is. And that it can be hard, because you're going to find that every person has their own struggles and things that they like, and it may not be the same as everyone else. In the end, that's why we have a democratic vote, because it's like, hey, majority is going to win, and maybe not everyone's happy, but this is the best, this is the most equitable thing we can do. So that's it. It's just like being a good listener, but also not being scared to go and just ask people for their opinions about things. That's what you can do to make sure that you're not just running over, one group in the company. And yeah, if you just, and tell people too, if you are unionizing and you're running into people saying, well, you might run into people who always want to criticize what you're doing, but never seem to want to step in. And that's when you really want to get the complainers and be like, you should be a steward. Or you should be on the bargaining team, because like clearly you have ideas and you have opinions. So we want you to come and join this group. So don't be afraid of that either. Like, don't be afraid of dissenting opinions, because sometimes those can be like your strongest warriors when it comes to like negotiating for things.
We call that the put up or shut up stage.
It's true. Yes. Yeah, it's true.
All right. We got 3 more questions here. So what's the usual cost in time and money to start a process to get into a union? I imagine it could be similar to choosing an insurance and time consuming to understand your best option.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good analogy, I think. So for us, like luckily when I came into it, like I said, there were other people who I had started looking at it, and I was trying to see if other people were interested. It turns out one of my coworkers had been talking, or a few of my coworkers had been talking to Ted from CWA and some other folks on and off for a while. And when I say that, like, probably a period of a few months, like sending emails back and forth, like nothing huge. So yeah, time consuming wise, if you're an organizer, you're probably going to spend like a few extra hours of your week working on that, whether it's like communicating, working on a contract language, whatever. So you are going to spend some extra time. And like, if you join a union or if you start a union and ratify the contract, there are dues, which is typically about 1% of your income. So like you are going to have basically like a small monthly fee that comes out of your paycheck. But with the raises that we all got, nobody really notices it. Like you don't feel it because we got a raise. So it's like, all right, I didn't get that full raise. I got most of that raise. But a little money's docked. So yeah, and in terms of costs, like that's really the only cost is just once all this is done, you're going to have dues coming out. And what those go to is the larger union employees. They have a few organizers and administrative staff, but they also have lawyers. And so if anything ever happens at your company that raises to the level of a court case, which I really hope not. I hope that doesn't happen to you. But if it does, CWA has those lawyers on retainer, and that's part of what your dues go toward, is just having the legitimacy and the backing of that. So yeah, it's probably like having like insurance. Honestly, it's cheaper than my insurance. So
we're American. Most everything is cheaper than our insurance.
It's true. So
my
sad.
mortgage might be cheaper than my insurance.
Oh my God. That's horrible.
Chase, good to see you over on YouTube, man. It's question: if I'm a contractor, do I qualify to join? And how will this affect my employment for work for hire future opportunities?
So it depends. Again, it depends. If you're a contractor, you probably can't qualify to join an employee union. There are exceptions. I have heard of some video game companies that had, there was a union. It was United States, US and Canadian employees, some of whom were full-time, some of whom were contractors. It's a weird legal gray area, honestly. And it depends on whether your company, it just depends on what the executives allow versus what the union pushes for, whether or not you have, and your unique situation, whether or not you have contractors in the union, but probably they're not. Again, you can benefit because a union job generally that has protections for employees will generally have, a codified rate for what you can get as a contractor, just to make sure people aren't like underpaying you because you're new or because they don't like you or something like that. There's something about your identity that they don't think is worth more or whatever. But I don't think it really affects your future employment. I honestly don't think most employers actually care if you were in a union or not. I think if you go into the interview with them and you say like, I think it's time to eat the rich starting with you, you may not get that job. But like, if you're just like, you've been in a union, I don't think it's going to affect you or anything.
Well, and they're not necessarily going to know either.
No.
So
yeah, they're not going to know.
All right. Last question, and then we'll let you go. From the Discord: would encouraging unionization in indie companies and startups benefit the companies no matter the size of the team, or would it only matter if the company gets hired or bought by a larger publisher or company to make a product?
Well, if you're in a smaller indie company, you might be part of a co-op already, because there are other structures besides unions that present a more equitable situation for workers, other than like the traditional employment structure. So you might already be benefiting from something like that. If not, I do think there is a place for unions in smaller companies. Paizo is kind of, I guess we're kind of medium. Like, I feel like we're small. We're certainly small compared to like Wizards of the Coast or, somewhere like Activision or like a lot of the big like AAA video game companies. But we are big compared to indie projects that are like less than 10 people or just like a few folks. I don't know, you may not need a union if there's only like 3 or 4 of you. But smaller companies can still, you can still benefit from it. And in some ways it might be easier to form one because you have less people that you have to talk to and figure things out with. But, depending on what your relationship is with your employer, if you feel like you have a good relationship with them, you might even just be able to bring it up to them like, hey, we've been thinking about we've been hearing a lot about what unions can do to benefit us. Is that something that you're interested in, that you would approve of here? Or do you have, can we start having meetings? Like, are there thoughts for what we can do to make this a better place, to retain our coworkers here? There's a lot of ways you could start that conversation. So in some ways, I do think there are companies that are small enough that they can there are other ways besides unionizing, but there is always, I feel like there is something positive that unions can bring to the table in pretty much any job. So just talk to your coworkers. And if your boss is cool, talk to them and just be like, hey, what can we do? That's it. I was afraid, things weren't all peachy all the time at Paizo before, but I still, it wasn't egregious. And I know there were some people who were scared to rock the boat, but honestly, I really do think overall it has strengthened our company and it has strengthened our relationship with executives because, again, it's all out in the open. Like, they know what we want, and they can tell us why or why not we're getting it. We have more financial information. We have more information about their policies. And I think it's only getting better. So even if you have a small company that you're happy at, it's still something that could help you.
Jenny, thank you so much.
Yeah.
This is awesome. It's always good to know, good to get the questions out there, good to have people around. And Jenny's on our Discord, and so she has the nice little coveted yellow guest of the show tag. So if you have questions, she can answer. This is your shot. What do you want to plug? What's coming up? What's cool from Paizo? What should people be looking out for?
So you should definitely look up Starfinder 2nd Edition, starfinderplaytest.com. It's going to be fully compatible with Pathfinder 2, so you can have a spaceship crash into your fantasy adventure, or you can send your fantasy party into the future and have all kinds of fun shenanigans, or just play a fun science fantasy game. Starfinder's awesome. If you like Starfinder 1st Edition, Mechageddon is an adventure path that's coming out. It's a campaign that's got all the encounters, monsters, some extra rules, everything you need to run a campaign using Starfinder mech combat rules. And that is my project. It's actually coming out in the next couple of days. May 22nd, I believe, is its street date. So I'm super excited about that. Check it out if you like big stompy robots and all kinds of wild stuff happening in space. We've got you covered.
Who doesn't like big stumpy robots, really?
I don't know.
I mean, that's just Dan.
Big stumpy everything. Well, this is super informative. Thank you so much. There's a lot of thank you in there in the chat too. So thank everyone for all the awesome questions and comments. We really dug deep into that stuff, and I'm excited to check out the new Pathfinder stuff, the new mecha stuff. If you guys are not on our Discord, if you're all are not on our Discord, discord.gg/indiegamebusiness. Also, indiegamebusiness.com. We don't have a link tree anymore because everything's on indiegamebusiness.com. You can sign up there. You find our sign up for the newsletter, get a list of publishers, get your investor list, and of course, our next conference is in September. So that's just right around the corner. Right around the corner. Right around the corner, Jay. This one is a 7-day long conference.
No,
it's going to be live 16 hours a day.
Sounds fun.
No, it's 1 day. It's 1
2
day.
days.
2 days.
Yeah, it's always 2 days.
2 days, man.
The 19th and 20th, 18th and 19th, middle of September. Anyway,
remember when it used to be 3 days?
Oh, yes, I do. Yeah. And I remember when it was just me and you doing everything too. And I'm glad those days are gone.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Thank you, everyone. Have an amazing weekend. Thank you so much, Jenny.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.